Well, welcome everyone, and I do want to say out loud just that everyone is welcome, no matter your ethnic origin, your race, your sexual identity, your sexual orientation, your gender identity, your socioeconomic status, your, what is it that Caleb says? It's real good. Whether you're a winner or whether you feel like you're losing all the time, you're welcome. Everyone is welcome. And it's just great to be here with you all. So we're going to do a few different things today. I know that's strange for us to do something out of the ordinary. One of the things I love that we've been doing is this thing with Logan about putting the sacred into everything. And I'm going to give a talk some time about this. It's something that Andrew's talked a lot about too. It's an idea of not lowering everything out of the sacred, but raising everything into the sacred. And I think that's a beautiful place to be. So we're going to do that today.
So today will be very fun. Some of you who, many of us are as very acquainted, at least, that would be the phrase I'm going to use, have heard of a practice called Lectio Divina. So this actually is a Christian practice, but the good news is I'm going to change it to take out a lot of the Christian connotations altogether, because text being sacred comes with a lot of baggage, because anything that's been written carries baggage. There are great things that we have required reading all throughout our lives that are filled with racism, sexism, ageism. No text is perfect, not the Bible, not any book we read. Oftentimes it's just a starting point for the information we have currently. So I picked something today to do Lectio Divina, just so to kind of walk you through how it works. Is you pick a sentence at random, which I did earlier because I picked it based on a graphic novel, and I got really insecure that I would pick a page with no text on it.
Look, I'm gonna cry.
Oh, I forgot you love this. Oh, this is great. So I picked a sentence at random from this coming of age graphic novel. Most of you haven't read it, but just to do a little shameless plug, the author of this also wrote a TV series of it, and it's on Netflix, and there's 8 episodes if you want to watch it.
What's it called?
Heartstopper. Yeah. When?
In April.
Oh, season 2 comes out in April. So there you go. I did not know that. So how Lectio Divina works is the first thing we do, and I'll do the first part because I've read the text, is we just talk about what's literally happening in the chapter, in this moment, what's just happening. Part 2 in the ancient mystic mindset was, what else does the Bible have to teach us about this text? So we're going to expand that, and each of you are going to be involved. And when I read the sentence, what song, poetry, other book you've read, idea you've heard, what does this sentence remind you of that can just give us all insight into what this is saying? The third part is more personal, and you talk about how it impacts your personal life, like what it's making you think about, how it's making you feel. And then the final part is, what are you called to? So what's something you can challenge yourself based upon what we read? Good news is, because it's a graphic novel, it's short, so let's make this easier. This is the awkward part where I can never open it up easily. So the sentence says, he's very different from your other friends, isn't he? You seem much more like yourself around him. So, what's literally happening in this section is one of the 2 main characters is having a conversation with their mom. And he's talking about this new friend he's made at school, and he's in this process of exploring his sexuality, how he feels. He has no idea yet what it is, but he's kissed the boy at this point, and now he's confused about it. How do I feel? Am I gay? Am I bi? Am I whatever? He's going on this journey. But what his mother sees is, you seem to be more yourself with this other boy than when I see you with your other friends. So that's part one. So now for part two, I'm going to read the sentence again, and this time, Andrew, can you grab that? I'm going to let each of you participate, and you can say, this one is what we think allegorically, right? So think about other things you've watched, you've read, you've listened to, and see if it just calls something to your mind. He's very different from your other friends, isn't he? You seem much more yourself around him. Well, you are thinking, I'll just say what popped into my head was, I started thinking about the first time I read Rising Strong, and Brene Brown brought up the true belonging concept, and how belonging to yourself means you belong everywhere. And it's cool to me that in this sentence I started thinking about how normal she perceives her son. It reminds me about he's really starting to belong to himself, even though he doesn't have anything figured out at this point.
So this is probably not what I'm supposed to say in church, but in the TV show Lucifer,
Perfect.
he's dating this girl and he realizes that he's not himself when he's with her, and he doesn't like the person that he is when he's with her.
That's absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
That's
So it
perfect.
just reminded me of that.
Yeah, perfect.
I think a lot of examples where somebody's not themselves, right? Like me,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Say that on there.
I can think of a lot more examples where characters are noted as not being themselves around certain people or groups. For example, Mean Girls, the entire movie.
I love that movie. Yeah.
I'm still struggling a little bit with the stages.
Yeah.
Is this not the stage where we talk about our feelings and thoughts about it, right?
That's the next one.
Great, okay. I have a lot from that stage.
I love that. Anyone else, or I'll move on.
So, I'm sorry to put in an example from the Bible, because I feel like we should sort of. Anyway, the example is, I think Jesus felt like that when he was with his disciples. So his mother and brothers come to see him, and he's like, they can't get in because the room's so crowded. And Jesus looks at the people he's with and he says, this is my mother and my brothers and my sisters. It's like, these are the people that I can be myself with.
Yeah.
When my family's there, I can't be. I keep being somebody else. And in fact, throughout Jesus' ministry, he's like constantly painted as somebody that he isn't. And so sometimes they paint him correctly by accident, like when they call him a friend of sinners. He's like, yeah, I'll take that one.
Yeah.
But he doesn't, I think he himself didn't feel comfortable to be himself, except with those who he was closest to. I think specifically the 12, but those people that he hung out with.
Yeah, love that.
So I have been, diagnosed with ADHD once. Of course, that was like a 10-minute meeting, so I don't know how accurate that is. But it seems like everybody I do feel like I can be myself around is extremely ADHD, such as you and a number of my other friends. Like, it's hard to even have a conversation with them because, very ADHD. And I love them for that because I feel like I could just be my regular weird self, and they don't even notice, it's normal to them.
Yeah. Perfect, thank you. Because Clay teed us up for step 3, so I'm going to read it again so everyone can. And this is where you pull from your personal life where you're at and where the sentence can teach us something. And it says, he's very different from your other friends, isn't he? You seem much more like yourself around him.
Well,
I'm a verbal processor, so I'm
That's
trying
perfect. That's
I'm going to just start with the talking part and hopefully get to what I'm trying to say, which is what I think is like, I feel like I have a lot of struggles, but one thing that's really natural for me is to always be myself. And I'm wondering, like, the different interpretations in different ways. You can be yourself around somebody and what that means, like what it means to be fully myself. And I'm wondering, is it that this person feels like accepted by the other person? Is it that they feel understood by the other person? Is it that they just have a lot of fun around the other person? And I guess I'm just wondering what it means, like when someone says you're more like yourself, you seem like yourself. In this context, I'm wondering if that's like, because sometimes, I'll feel like I really like being me when I'm around this person. And I think I was just wondering from all the different standpoints. I always feel like I'm myself, but sometimes I like the version of myself. I feel like there's different people bring different parts out of me, and I was just thinking about it from that perspective as well.
That's really good, because like my main thought was, this is a situation where I normally come into situations when I don't know people as very guarded, and don't like to let my guard down. I don't like people to see all sides of me. I try to judge and pinpoint what they like, so that I can feel safe and protected and not like I'm going to be attacked.
I should do that a little bit more.
I don't always know that that's healthy. It causes a lot of mental health issues. I wouldn't advise it.
Not much, just a little bit.
Anyone else on this one? Oh, Maddie.
So I was actually reminded of that very point in that novel when, okay, let me back up and explain this a little bit more.
The novel that we're talking about.
Yeah. So when I first came out, was dragged out of the closet to my parents, I was beginning a relationship with this girl, and it was like my first real relationship ever. And I remember telling them, like during one of the first conversations that we had, she makes my life happier. And my mother's response to that was, I don't care about your happiness. And months passed, and that relationship, it didn't work. Like, we're still friends. It didn't work out, long story short, though. But I was home for winter break, which was approximately a year later from that first conversation. So this year, I was home for winter break. And up to that point, I hadn't told my mom who the person I was dating was. And I finally felt this year, at the point where like she had come around, I felt like she had come around enough for her to tolerate it, at least, if I revealed who it was. And because it was a topic that had been brought up anyways. And we were talking about this girl, and my mom was like, yeah, you really care more about her than your other friends, don't you? And I finally was like, Mom, she was the person that I had been dating this entire time. And the difference in her reaction was like 180. It was astounding. And just the amount of love and acceptance, and not fully acceptance because she's still, but we're working on it. It was worlds better than it was a year ago. And I do think that a lot of that is due to the fact that like with this relationship and it being my first relationship, it was about me learning to come into myself and be able to express my love fully, like in a way that felt right to me. And I think as much as my parents resisted that, they did see that and saw the change, and I think it impacted them a lot. So just to say that like, when you're in those moments of becoming yourself, it impacts not only the other person in the relationship with you, but the way everyone else perceives you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Cool, so the final step is what we feel called to. This can be as simple as a lot of what we alluded to, what we were thinking about in our personal lives, and maybe we feel something that we want to take action on, like a next step. Don't think of it as some big world-changing thing, but like what's the next right thing that you feel called to based on this? So I'll read it one more time. He's very different from your other friends, isn't he? You seem much more like yourself around him. Go.
Okay, since I have the mic, I'll take the opportunity. I have felt in recent years that a lot of places that were home for me, quote unquote home, are no longer that, based on shifts in my perspective and my understandings of how the world works, how God works, does God work? All of those questions. It's been hard to think of some former homes as homes anymore. So I think part of my growing process, and something I've already been trying to do this year, is to maybe try to find those homes in new places, new people, and give people a shot, I guess, outside of old communities and groups that, no longer seem to accommodate the ways I think, or the people that I no longer think are sinful. I don't know. Not that I ever really thought that, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's.
absolutely.
Mine is sort of about Michelle, but she's an open person, so she's okay with me saying this.
I don't know yet.
So, I think you all know that she's a verbal processor, and I certainly know that, but I still get tripped up by it. So when she is verbally processing and talking out loud and wants me, and I am listening, I am part of it, it doesn't occur to me that I'm not supposed to answer when it seems like a question, or offer help when it seems like she's looking for the right words. So I figured out that a lot when I say something that somehow goes off the rails is because she didn't actually want me to answer that question, that she was verbally processing.
Yes.
Or that she was verbally processing what she was typing, not asking me for a word choice.
Oh, I love
Done. So, I don't know how long it's going to take me to learn that my daughter is a verbal processor. Everybody who knows her knows that. But I have got to have that as a first thought. Oh, she's verbally processing. I am involved in her life, and listen. And it's part of a conversation, but it's a verbal processing conversation. It's not asking mom her opinion on something. Conversation or asking for help. So I think I want to be a place where the people that I'm at home with and adore feel themselves and don't have to be edited, and part of that is in the other direction, knowing when they say something what that means.
Yeah, something that I think I like to do, but I'm really bad at, and it's really good that I didn't say a cuss word there, is, because that's not what I thought, but I filtered myself, is I like to have a lot more like play in my life where I do things more improvised and have fun that's spontaneous. I get a lot of life in that and feel more myself. But oftentimes, like, especially in like the post-COVID era, right? Like we're supposed to stay at home, we're supposed to do this set thing. And I've lost a lot of that. And I feel like I want to continue stepping in the direction of allowing myself to have fun, to feel more myself, even if I understand things mentally. I'm not actually improvising enough and allowing myself to have any flexibility in my schedule in my life. Perfect, and then I'll just end this with a prayer where I'm just going to offer up what's called a blessing to a character for something that they have done that I think the world needs to hear. And in this situation, I'm going to bless the character Nick's mom because she has no idea what he's going through, but she sees something in him, and she sees that he's whole and that he's more himself. And she pretty much knows that that could change him dramatically. He might not have the same friends he's had and all the people she's interacted with. I picture her feeding these people. He's a rugby player in this graphic novel, and you don't ever really see her interaction with them, but she knows them. And so she sees something here with this new friendship, this new relationship, where it's taking her son in the right direction. And I just put a blessing out there for people who have that person, whether it's a family member, a friend, because we need those people who help us step into our next, who help us get back past the hard thing that we're going through. So, amen.
So we're going to do a little exercise, and I'm going to send it to everyone's phones. If anyone doesn't have a smartphone, I've already taken this, and other people have already taken this, and I think we're setting up the computer for one person to take it on. Harvard has made this implicit bias test, so you can choose different. I'm going to text it to all y'all. But you can choose it. You can see, like, it can test your automatic bias between Native Americans and white people, religious, Arab, Muslim, Asian disabilities, physical disabilities, skin colors, gender, weapons, fat, thin, gay, straight, young, old. I took the presidential popularity implicit bias today.
It was fun.
Yeah, so I'm going to send this out. It's a tool, and it's also measuring a couple variables. It's measuring a particular bias under this test. So it's not measuring what your values are, what your choices are, and it's also not a perfect example. It's not a perfect measure of a bias because, well, you can't like make a perfect test for that. And also they say there's a lot you can like gain. For instance, and by the way, I am going to recommend anyone that hasn't taken one of these yet, I think it makes sense. We're all going to take one together, but I think it makes sense to start with the black-white bias. I showed an automatic strong preference for white people over black people. And it's one of those things, it's like, I hope my choices don't reflect that, but I want to be aware of what my automatic bias is so that I can put it in that context and be thoughtful about it. If you haven't finished your test, you have a strong automatic preference for reading things fully. So I'm going to go ahead and diagnose that. So obviously, this is a test. It measures reaction speed, and it associates positive and negative with linking other things in your mind. I think things that are closerly linked in your mind, you will have a tendency to, it'll be easier to touch one or the other. But obviously, this is just measuring very little data, very little variables, so don't be freaked out. But I think it is an important tool. There's science to show that hiring, marriage, getting a house loan, basically everything in our lives, bias plays a huge role. So unfortunately, y'all, I show a strong, literally the highest, strong, and I'm not surprised, I show a strong everything, but a strong automatic association for male with science and female with liberal arts.
How did you get that out of this test? All I know is it's bias toward children, white children.
Wait, what?
She got a bias
towards white children relative to different tests.
Yeah, so it depends on which one you took. And guys, once again, this isn't like they're not reading your soul. However, I think it's valuable data to know. For instance, I think I struggled a little bit because I get a little confused what's liberal arts and what's science. And I think I read astronomy every time as astrology, and I was like, definitely liberal arts, man. So I'm just saying, although I think it's probably correct, I did see some flaws with my fundamental understanding of what was math and what was science. But do we want to have anyone share their response or no?
I just did.
Oh yeah. Well, I shared mine, so.
I showed a bias
What test do you
toward
take? What test do you take?
Jewish religion over Islamic religion. So I took the religion one. And I do believe that's the way I was brought up. And I do believe that that's something inherent in where I'm coming to now, and as you say, it's separate from my choices, but realizing that I was brought up with that bias, or I'm not necessarily saying my parents, but just everything, every influence on me until now has that bias. And I just think it's helpful to know that when I'm treating people, I can think, okay, I've got to make sure that this influence doesn't determine who I am, but that my choices in Christ determine who I am.
And I know I've read somewhere, but they're creating new forms to maybe help us retrain our brains. And I'm also interested in looking into some of that as well. So it's not all just like, well, you're gonna be sexist forever, guys. Good luck. Feel good about yourselves.
I actually got moderate.
You stinker.
What were you doing?
So I did the whether I prefer European Americans or African Americans, and I was only moderate on European Americans. So it was like, that's not.
Okay, take away the mic. Give it back.
Sorry, Michelle.
If it helps Michelle, I was slight bias toward European Americans.
Why would that help?
I don't know.
That's just
Oh, you are
that's just holy evidence. That's just like, oh, if it makes you feel better, I was a straight A student in undergrad. Sorry you failed. I got you. I'll help you feel better.
I did 2 tests today.
Okay, mic's gone.
And the first one I did was Judaism versus Islam, and then I got a slight preference for Islam, actually.
Really?
Even though I identified at the end as preference for Judaism. I don't know.
But you took the same test twice?
I get pretty confused which one's the Quran and Torah, so that might have thrown off the results. I don't know. But I guess
that could normally sway the results.
I generally have a pretty good time with either Islamic or Jewish friends, so I don't know. I don't think I really have a preference. But then the second one I did was physically abled versus physically disabled people. Now, I have kind of a long, specific history with physically disabled, basically being in conjunction with mood disabilities, personality disorders, other kinds of things like that. And then I was also living in relatively close quarters with these people. So I have a very strong preference for physically able people, but I don't think I've had a fair sample. But I thought that was interesting.
So what was your strong, and this is measuring your automatic bias. These are measuring your automatic biases, not your choices or how you see them. This is an automatic, without thinking response. What was your score on the disabled?
It was very strongly against disabled
A strong
people.
automatic preference for physically non-disabled. He showed a strong automatic preference for non-physically disabled.
Right, yeah.
That doesn't surprise me. They were pretty crazy at that group.
Well, and so most biases are based on this idea of a limited exposure. And so if you have your only exposure has been with a few disabled people who were not good people, for example, or something like that.
Most of them. I mean, a lot of them were awesome, but you generally remember the scary people.
Yeah, sure.
The ones that were cool to hang out with.
That's right.
And then it seemed like half the time they get swept up in a van somewhere, and they're like, oh, well, we were hanging out, but I guess she's got to go now.
And so the same thing is true for most of us, specifically with Muslims, because our connection to Muslims is almost exclusively through the news. And so our bias is so strong because what we're hearing are what conservative Muslims have done in the name of their religion. And what sort of kicked me down the road on that particular one was I had sort of justified my biases against
I would say
Muslims.
not conservative, I'd say radical or fundamentalist.
Yeah, fundamentalist.
Fundamentalist Muslim.
Yeah, and I mean, all the labels are hard, right? But even, I would have the same kinds of biases against conservative Muslims as I would against conservative Christians. And that was what clicked for me was, wait, I don't want everybody judging me as a fundamentalist Christian because I'm a Christian. And I realized that if I say I'm a pastor, I know that I'm already in trouble with, 80% of the population. Because that's so connected to fundamentalism Christianity. Because that's the ones that they know. That's the people that they see on the news. That's the people that they hear the loud voices. And as a progressive Christian, I'm a little insulted that you would associate me with those people. And I realized that's what I was doing to my Muslim brothers, sisters, non-binary Muslims, that I was putting on them a label of a certain kind of Muslim. And there are, turns out, who knew, progressive Muslims. And there are progressive Jewish people. And so my bias is against people who are exclusive instead of inclusive. And if I can just make that one shift, and I really admit my bias against people who are exclusive. And I'm not sure it's a bad bias. So that's one of our questions is, are there biases that we say, well, that's one that I'm going to sort of agree with, I'm going to choose to pick. If somebody is a particularly violent person, well, I'm biased against them, in a way. And I pick that. Like, I don't want them to be that. I would like them to change. And so almost anybody that is exclusive, I would hope for them something that I think is better than that, which is inclusive. All right, we have just started on this. What I'd like to do next week is I'm going to give you 13 kinds of biases. So I'll tell you just the first one, just so that you know where we're headed. The first one is confirmation bias. And I think probably all of you know what that means.
Go ahead, tell us.
So confirmation bias is the human brain welcomes information that it already thinks is true. So if I believe that the earth is flat, then anything that I see or hear about that sounds like that says the earth is flat, I'm going to go with it. It's going to confirm what I already believe. Whereas if someone tells me that the earth is round, look at a curvature of the earth, I'm going to say, well, there are other explanations for that. Because I have a bias towards a belief already that the earth is flat. Now, just to be clear, that's not what I believe. I don't believe the earth is flat. But that any of us would do. We already believe something, and then any information that we hear that agrees with that, we put into our brain. Anything that doesn't agree with that, we give reasons why it's not true. Or we just dismiss it. We don't even hear it. That's probably the most commonly thought of kind of bias, is confirmation bias. Well, so next week I'll give us 13. And the whole point here is, how do we see people truthfully? And so one of the reasons for this test is if we know that we have a bias against, or for, say it's against Muslims, if we know that we have a bias, then we have a mechanism that we can talk to ourselves about to actually have a truer picture of a person. And I think all of you know the Hagar story of the God who sees me. That idea is, as Christians, we want to be God-like in seeing people for who they really are. And to see people for who they really are, we have to admit our own biases. As soon as we can start to admit our biases, then we can sort of shake off the cobwebs of what we've put on people. And we can decide, we can see them for who they really are. And so this will be fun. So this is just like a two-part little thing on seeing people for who they really are. You know, one of those is how we view God. We have so much baggage, good and bad baggage, about how we see God. And it turns out, I hope this doesn't offend anybody, none of us sees God clearly for who they really are. We see God in part. And what we want to do is we want to sort of unload some of the baggage that we have with who God is. Even as we're taking communion this afternoon, we want to be thinking about, wait, what is all of the stuff I have wrapped up with this communion about who God is? And so the spoiler of that is, God became people so that God could experience all of the things that we experience, even death. Not only that, but then we could say, actually the God that we love, that we're that close to, has actually physically experienced what we experience. Because it's one thing to say, oh yeah, God knows how we hurt. And it's another thing to say, God actually knows how we hurt. Actually did it. All right, so let's take you can take your communion things if you want to go back and get them. And even as you take them, and you can just eat them whenever you take them, even as we do this, we want to be thinking, God, I want to see you for who you really are. Help me see you more clearly, more like who you really are. I would even say, God, expose in me the biases I have towards you and against you. So as you eat, ask the Holy Spirit, show me who you are. As you drink, ask the Holy Spirit, even as I drink this, show me who you are. Show me what your true nature is. And this is a question for another day, but Logan, I'm really interested, because I don't know the answer. I think I know the answer, but was Jesus different? Would he be very different with different people? So in the question that you were asking today, when does he really most like himself? Would his self be different in a different culture. And I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. That Jesus was fully human and therefore was a certain Enneagram number. That Jesus was a certain initials in Myers-Briggs. I'm pretty sure it was an INFP. I don't know. I just made that up because Tuan is that and I like her. So as you take this, we are asking the Holy Spirit, help me understand you. Given who I am, will you help me understand who you are? Let me see you for who you really are. And the prayer really isn't for this split moment, for God to tell you who they are. Really the prayer is, over this next rest of my life, would you more and more help me see the trueness of who you are. Many of you have heard of that horrible time when a preacher preached the sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And just for us to say, oh, that's not who God is. And that's a bias so that many of us have attached to God. We just let that go. And we take on the bias of, I don't know if it's a bias. We want to see the truth of, I hope it's a truth, that this is God that truly loves, that receives, that accepts, that is the God who sees. And wouldn't it be cool if somebody in the Bible said, God is love? Oh wait, they did. All right. I love you all. Great to be with you. Thank you. This will be a fun journey this week and next. Thank you. Any announcements?
Wednesday night at our house.
Oh yeah, Wednesday night, 6:30. Dinner at our house. I don't know where we'll be this week. You're coming?
The comments.
Oh yeah, Wednesday night, after we eat, we're going to, hopefully the weather will permit, we're going to go outside. Because there is, between 8 and midnight, we're supposed to be able to see a green comet.
What?
Which only occurs every 500,000 years?
I was wrong. It's every 50,000 years.
50?
50,000.
50,000 years. So humans have seen it before, but nobody that we know.
And I'm bringing a telescope.
So Ralph is bringing a telescope.
Woo!
And this is from Ralph, that I didn't know about it, but she's alerted us to this situation.
What time exactly will it be?
Between 8 and midnight.
Okay, long party.
Go outside, look toward the east. It's at the tail of the Little Dipper.
I will be taking names after for people that commit to stay till midnight, if that's how long it takes.
Thank you for that. And that's Wednesday night.
It's on the first and the second. You should be able to see it.
After our dinner time. All right. Great to be with you all.
And it's better to see the green comet than it is to see the groundhog.
Absolutely. Thank you, those of you online. Great to have you here. Caleb's not with us today, so you're on your own.